Mentioning earlier, shifting our focus right now, the economic survey has been tabled in the Lok Sabha. Economic Survey 2026 pegs financial year 2027 growth at 6.8 to 7.2%. India's recent economic performance has demonstrated that macroeconomic stability and growth can be sustained even in a turbulent global environment. This is the latest that we're getting for you right now. This is as the economic survey has been tabled in the Lok Sabha, which pegs the growth for financial year 2027 at 6.8 to 7.2%. India's recent economic performance has demonstrated that macroeconomic stability and growth can be sustained even in a turbulent global environment. And that's the latest that we are bringing for you right now. More on this, we have Pallavi Ghosh live with us. Pallavi, thank you so much for joining me. What can you tell us?
See, the main crux and the conclusion of the economic survey, which was tabled by the finance minister both in Lok Sabha as well as in Rajya Sabha, is the fact that India's growth story is definitely moving ahead. And this despite the fact that there are many factors of external factors of global uncertainty. The report does make a reference to the point that there are trade uncertainties going on with America, but it is also very hopeful that this is something which could be sorted out soon, and therefore all is going to be very well. It's very important when they are talking about the main barometers. How do you decide on the economic growth story when you put it into a part of your economic survey? What has been the growth in the manufacturing sector, in the agrarian sector? In all of that, the survey gives green boxes and green tick marks, which essentially points out that there has been a growth as far as the industrial sector is concerned. Just to quote very quickly, the industrial sector continues to display a strong momentum despite an evolving and challenging global environment. It also talks about major traction which has taken place under the PLI scheme. The business sentiment, the corporate sentiment is gung-ho because they are very buoyed by many of the feel-good policies which have been announced by the government. The survey, of course, has been presented just a couple of days after the EU-India FTA has been signed. But it is these FTAs which the survey talks about. Many of the others which have been signed, gives the economic survey a hope that it will be reflected in India's economic growth story. It also talks about that the global economy is marked by a supply chain realignment, but all of this is something which is showing a positive curve up as far as India is concerned. However, it does raise concerns about that there needs to be more incentives for domestic engines of growth. That means there has to be more help which has to come in for the MSMEs, the small sectors. I think this is a very, very important indication coming in from the economic survey that possibly the union budget is looking at giving incentive as far as these sectors are concerned.
Right, Pallavi, thank you so much. Also joining me is Shweta Puj. Thank you so much for joining me there. The growth for financial year 2027 pegged at 6.8 and 7.2%. Now we know that India's recent performance has also demonstrated that macroeconomic stability and growth can be sustained. India there has proven to be a reliable growth engine. What can you tell us?
Right. So true to the CA's signature style of this survey as well, has a more cautious approach towards what the economy could grow at. Having said that, I think some of the most significant things that he's highlighted in the survey. One is that he's spoken about how India needs to move from import a substitution to strategic resilience and strategic indispensability. He's spoken about why India needs to employ what he calls as economic statecraft, which is different from economic policy. He's talking about how India needs to use its tools to ensure that India is as valuable a player and has something significant to offer to the world to be integrated into the global supply chain. So I think that's quite interesting. That's something new that we've seen in this survey. He talks about from Swadeshi to strategic resilience and strategic indispensability. Then, if you look at the past surveys done by Mr. Nageswaran, he's been fairly cautious. He's taken a very cautious view on AI. But in this survey, he talks about the evolution of the AI ecosystem in India, and he talks about why we need a phased roadmap for AI's future. He's also interestingly taken up the issue of making our cities work for people. He's spoken about why India needs to upgrade its governance. Again, that's a theme that's been very rooted in Mr. Nageswaran's economics and economic surveys over the years. He's always spoken about governance and nuts and bolts governance and how reforms need to be implemented at a faster pace to power India's growth. So that's something again that we see in this survey as well as an overarching theme. And he also flags the skilling issue in India. He talks about getting skilling right and how that's important. While we have a demographic dividend, he has a full chapter devoted to employment and skill development. Then he's also spoken about the need to integrate with the globe, and he's spoken about agricultural performance, food management, and overall he's spoken about as the world becomes protectionist, as the global trade dynamics change, India needs to look inwards. India needs to build its own capabilities. I think that's a very, very important theme coming in from the survey. And overall, the picture that we see of the Indian economy through the survey is quite heartening. He does talk about that India has shown immense resilience, driven and anchored in domestic demand. I think that's very, very important, that he's shown, at a time when there's so much geopolitical uncertainty coming from the CEA, that India has shown resilience, and he has also revised his medium term growth forecast. I think all of those are very important indications to show that India has done well so far, but he's also flagged the issue of why India needs to, like I said, use economic statecraft. I think that's one of the key themes coming out from the survey.
Absolutely. Now, Shweta, on that, if I could just expand a little, when you mention protectionism, especially when we're seeing such a rising global trade uncertainty and US protectionism, that is something that has been in the talks for quite some time. Right now, that being said, how do you think India is securing its place as a reliable partner? Of course, it's been good news for us, the India-EU FTA, and in line of that, India has really strengthened its global position as a reliable partner.
Right. So, in the last year and a half, if you see, India has concluded several free trade agreements, not only with the EU, but even with UK, Australia, New Zealand. So, that has been India's strategy to diversify. And India-EU FTA has been called as the mother of all deals because it has the capacity to absorb a lot of the exports that India was sending to the US. It can be absorbed by Europe. So that in itself is very, very significant. Another thing that the survey highlights is India's infrastructure and digital infrastructure. That again has been cited as one of the key growth drivers for the India story. The survey talks about growth in telephone connections and how they've outpaced urban growth. I think that's again very, very significant. And we've also seen he's spoken about while we see the rupee weakening, but he talks about that, how a robust and a stable currency can be achieved through export competitiveness. Again, that I think is very, very significant.
All right, we have Pallavi live with us also. Pallavi, in light of all the global uncertainty and US protectionism that we're seeing right now, what are some of the things that you're going to be looking out for?
See, it's a mix of caution, as Shweta was pointing out, but it's also a mix of hope and caution, I would say, as far as the economic survey report is concerned, which has been put forward by the chief economic advisor. It talks about certain things which India needs to do. And one of them, of course, is it talks about increasingly entrepreneurial attitude of the government, which means the government needs to be very, very proactive. When the Prime Minister was addressing the media this morning, he was essentially talking about how India is moving towards the concept of Viksit Bharat, Bharat 2047. He spoke about the fact that how the government believes in finding a solution to the problems, not just listing the problems. When we talk about entrepreneurial approach, and the economic survey makes a reference to that, it also clarifies that it does not mean that we are going to put a focus only on the private sector. We want both the sides. They're human, and this again something which the PM touched upon. That when you're talking about progress, when you're talking about reforms, it also has to be human centric. And this is critical because India is a largely not just an agrarian economy, but also is a labor intensive economy. And focus is going to be on job generation. That is going to be also the focus as far as the union budget to be presented on first is concerned. So it talks about an entrepreneurial approach, which means it's a reforms, perform, progress, which the Prime Minister spoke about. It has to be kind of more, directed towards generation, not just of generation of manufacturing, industrial growth, and growth stories, reform stories, and more. Another interesting part quickly, him, is that the survey also talks about deregulation, and this is going to be a very important element as far as the union budget is concerned, which is what my finance ministry and government sources have been telling us. So this is going to be the main launchman, and as I said, just to conclude, it is a little cautious. It is aware of the pressures, rising gold prices. It talks about the tariff in America. It also talks about the global uncertainty, but it also talks about the fact that there's a political stability in our country. There's a clear direction coming in from the political leadership, which gives us hope of having at least 7.6 to 7.8% of our growth story or GDP growth story.
All right, Pallavi, thank you so much for the latest on that. Of course, we'll continue to track all developments on that front as well. Let's